Good morning, everybody, or afternoon, or whenever you're watching this. Okay. So, today I'm having a friend of mine by. Not here, but here. Not here. Here. Scott Lost, who's a great indie creator and someone I've gotten to know a lot better over the past few years. We'll get into all that. But first, just update on D versus M 1979 progress. So I am, for people who've been watching, past couple weeks I've been a few days behind and then slowly reclaiming ground. And I am still in reclaiming ground phase. I am trying to finish page 32, and I'm very close. I will finish it today. So I think I'm about, again, and I think this is similar to last week, about a day behind. Because I normally like to be starting a new page Saturday morning. But, so it's a little annoying that I'm still one day behind. And it's because it's just a huge pain in the ass of a panel. It's avoiding spoilers as usual. It's several soldiers standing together behind cover. And that just, it just becomes like a whole, it's all these uniforms and all these faces and all these poses and all these M16s, and it's just it's basically I made myself a mini version of a crowd scene to draw in my script. Writer Gary wrote himself like all the soldiers huddled and behind this corner, and then you got to draw it and you're like, oh, this sucks. So anyway, the rest of the page is done. It's just that panel, which is a wide, it's about a third of it, of the page vertically. It goes the full span horizontally. And it's just slowing me down. But I think I can finish it today. And the good news is the next page, 33, will be a cakewalk. Like that. So I will absolutely be caught up by next Saturday. I mean, life can happen. But right now I'm saying like that I don't see how I'm not caught up next Saturday. Next Saturday I should be starting page 34. And I think it's even fair to put this on myself. I think I should have already started page 34. I think I'll be able to finish page 33 mid or late next week, and therefore get a jump on page 34, which is good because, for every carrot, there's a stick. Well, 33 is going to be a cakewalk. 34 is going to suck. And frankly, 35 is going to suck too. And then it gets better. I'm entering, this is some bumpy road I'm getting into with the book. There's the next, let me see here. Like I said, 33 is easy. 34, I'm going to just rattle off the ones that I think are going to be a pain in the ass. 34, 35, 37, and then there's a good half dozen page stretch after that just sucks too. So like this is entering a complicated visually part of the story. It's all very doable. Like I'm not looking at any of it and thinking, I don't even know how to do that. Like I know it's doable. It's just they're dense, complex pages, and it's not even so much that there's so much going on in them, but it just needs to be just right. And I'm anticipating a lot of futzing to get it what it needs to be. Yeah. Yeah, so pretty much the rest of this calendar year, in terms of the drawing, there are very few easy days. Like it's just gonna be work. But anyway, the bright side, closing in on having drawn all the pages. Sometime early next year, not committing to when. Boy, I would love to. I still, in my back pocket, I've talked about this. I think I talked about this months ago. I still have thought about burning some PTO and just picking a week where I can really intensely work on this full time and maybe get ahead. Which would just feel nice. It would just feel nice just to like shave a couple weeks off the schedule, because I was able just to sit here and every day and draw for 8 or 12 hours, which is something I never really get to do, except on the weekends a little bit. But anyway, we'll see. Okay. So that's where 79 is at. What else? For your Star Wars moment, I started watching Andor last night. Watched the first 2 episodes. Obviously, it's too early to make a judgment. But what I will say is, just already those 2 episodes, for sure the most interesting Star Wars show I've ever watched. Like, it's not even, it's way more what I want from this sort of thing. It's Mandalorian I liked. Boba Fett was sort of boring. I had I overall had lukewarm feelings about Obi-Wan Kenobi. So this is the first one where I was like, the first 2 episodes at least, I was like, this is awesome. This seems really cool. My only, and this isn't a complaint, I don't want anyone to think like, actually, I'm bringing this up to show you that like, I can like new Star Wars content. I'm not anti-new Star Wars. But the one thing I would say, and this is an observation more than a complaint, the music in Andor, and in fact, the whole aesthetic thing, it's so Blade Runner-y. And I love Blade Runner, which is part of why maybe I'm kind of enjoying Andor. But I could imagine some people out there, I don't know, I haven't talked to anybody else about Andor. I could imagine some people out there is like, it doesn't feel like Star Wars. It feels like Blade Runner. And it's like, yeah, but if you're telling a story about, this aspect of the Star Wars saga, I mean, you could do worse. I don't know. I'm enjoying it so far. Only 2 episodes in. I think there's one more available, and then maybe another one coming this coming week. But it seemed pretty cool. I liked it. That's about it. This weekend is just going to be drawing, and I have to, and then just chores. I gotta mow the lawns. The kitchen is a wreck. I gotta do some dishes. It's a whole but otherwise just work. Okay, I'm gonna get my art file open while we wait for, I told Scott 11:15 or 11:30, somewhere in there. So, and we're still a little early. So I'm going to get situated. Yes, there's the demon panel right there with all the soldiers. And everything else is pretty much done. There's little details I need to add to 1 or 2 of the panels, but otherwise it's done. It's just that first panel. And it's funny. This is kind of, I was thinking when I was drawing it, like I said, I've got 4 soldiers together. It kind of Squatch, you just pipe down. Just pipe down. All right. You got 3 or 4 hours of my time last week. All right. Weren't complaining about me not working then. Who's Mr. Hollywood now? Who is Mr. Hollywood now? That's my question. Drawing this panel is kind of a so I think I've talked a little bit about how the next D versus M is sort of a SEAL Team 6 sort of story. It's about a little band of special ops type people. And I try not to think about it too, I'm trying to focus on the one I'm working on. And I try not to think too much about drawing future comics. I think about the script a lot, and I'm always making notes, like fleshing out. I have an outline for all the remaining books, but I'm always like, they're not written. I have an outline. I have like, this is what the story is going to be, and I have a basic flow of it. But the little details, the little beats, like how it's going from A to B, I haven't figured that out yet. So anyway, the next one is like a SEAL Team 6 thing. I'm doing this panel, and I have a few panels with like soldiers all together doing their thing, and realizing that like, that's a bear. That sucks to draw. And I'm thinking about the fact how D vs. M 2001, the way I'm envisioning it is like 6 guys in the woods doing their thing. And I'm just thinking like, oh, that. So I'm gonna, my gut reaction to that, but this is again, writer Gary versus artist Gary. My gut reaction is, I'm feeling a lot of pressure to get that script lean. Like, I don't want a 60-page book of 6 guys. Like that sounds like a nightmare. On the other hand, that's artist Gary talking. And as I've said many, many times, including to our guest who's going to show up, like, I keep writer Gary and artist Gary pretty segregated. And I guess all I can say is artist Gary, this one, is really, really, really hoping, crossing his fingers, that writer Gary doesn't write some, insane soldier epic in the woods with 6 guys that goes on for dozens and dozens and dozens of pages. Like that's not great. That's really gonna hurt. It's gonna hurt artist Gary. You might do like, not just emotionally, maybe physically. It might be bad. I don't know. Hopefully that won't happen. Squatch, I'm not gonna respond to all this nonsense. I can't. Okay. Let's see here. Coffee in a Dinosaurs versus Marsbots logo. There's nothing fancy. It's not fancy. Ridiculous. You know, I have him on my show. Being a nice guy. And look at the thanks I get. Look at this. Horrible. Hey, and just to let everybody know, I will be present, but I won't be participating. The next top 5 is going to be hip hop albums it's going to be, participating will be Jim Lujan, Scott Serkland, Josh Kemble, and I believe there was one other, I think I read it when I was half asleep, but Jim might have said one other person was going to show up. I'll probably be like emceeing. It'll be on my channel. I'll be streaming it, but I know this much about hip hop. I mean, I don't know. They're picking top 5 albums. I don't know if I could name 5 hip hop artists. So like, I'm not going to be a moron and just be like, yeah, I'll just pick some. Like, I'm going to sit back, but I'm going to have my little pad of paper out to take notes and like to, maybe I'll come up with a playlist that I want to listen to educate myself on hip hop. My hip hop experience is, I mean, I know who the Beastie Boys are. I saw 8 Mile. I don't know. Like it's pretty limited, pretty slim. I did go to an Atmosphere show in Tucson. It was not only it was the first and only, now that I think about it, live like hip hop show I've ever gone to. And I have to say, and this is, I'll be curious to see what the hip hop experts in the top 5, what their reaction is to this. My impression, so of course I've heard, I don't live in a bubble. I've heard hip hop, but it just never clicked with me I don't know. That's just not my thing. But then I went to this live show and it kind of blew my mind. Like it was a completely different experience. And there was just something about like the rawness of it and the energy of it. And I don't know, it just had a vibe to it, being there and seeing it live, that I felt like I had never experienced from that before, from hip hop. And it made me wonder, and this is what I would be curious what the hip hop experts think, if it's kind of a live art. Like, I wonder if they would agree or disagree that like something is like, there's something about it that, well, unlike other musics where it's like, it doesn't really matter. The album's great. So, and some bands, like they're better on the album because it's also produced. And like, if you see them live, you're kind of like, ugh. I felt like this was the reverse of that. Like, I think I saw it, and again, one show, what do I know? But I saw one, this performance, and for the first time in my life, sort of got it. I wonder, is that like is that just me? Or is that sort of, is hip hop, is it like a spoken word like thing where like you kind of have to be there? It's not the same just to listen to you can't just listen to howl on a tape. You want to go see it perform, like that kind of thing. I don't know, but that was my that's, now I've shared my entire knowledge and experience with hip hop to you right now. There we go. That's it. This is why I will not be participating in the top 5 hip hop albums, but those other people will, and I'm looking forward to it. And the top 5 shows have always been fun, and I'm excited to see what they have to say. Okay, I'm told that our guest is ready. Hold on just one second. I'm told by my production team here. I'm just asking for a moment. Let's see here. Let's see. Might be having some technical difficulties though. Hold on just 1 second. Look, just because I don't know anything about hip hop doesn't make me a fancy white. I don't understand. It's weird, the resistance I'm getting from the public on my commentary on fancy whites and these accusations and these I don't I don't understand. To me, frankly, it comes off as defensive. It makes me wonder if you, sir, are a fancy white and you're feeling a little attacked. Is that it? Are you feeling a little called out? I know I'm very comfortable knowing I'm not a fancy white. People, I don't think you understand the concept of fancy white. Paul, noted. All right. Paul was here today. Good. Good. Okay. Scott's gonna, his camera wasn't showing up, so he's rebooting real quick to see if that makes a difference. Assuming that was fancy white. It's like the Justice Stevens quote about pornography. I can't define it. I just know it when I see it. You know that show Succession? I have never watched it, but my impression of it, what I've heard about it, it's about fancy whites. All right. We're talking about just, the people who they're removed by their own choice from the rabble, from the mob. You know what I mean? Next time I'll have charts and stuff. I'll explain the whole fancy white thing. I feel like there's a lot of I didn't think this would be that challenging of a proposition. I think some people know. So some people, when I brought this up, they're like, they know. And then other people are like, what do you mean? What are you talking about? Well, I don't know, maybe define, and I don't know. I don't know I'll have to think about this. No, that's not a correct definition right there. See, this is the problem. I need to do a better job of explaining fancy whites to the world. I don't know. I guess I'm not. Maybe this is a less understood universal experience and concept than I imagined. Certainly, wherever you're living, wherever you're living, there's a part of town, it's a part of town where it's one of these apartment complexes where a studio or a 1-bedroom is going for $2,500 a month. All right. Anyway, we'll get back to this. We'll circle back to fancy whites another time. Let's get to our guest. So, Mr. Lost.
What's up, dude?
How you doing, man?
Fancy white himself, Gary Hyde.
Okay, look. Now, before we move on to more interesting topics, see that I think that's people who care a lot about their lawns, but not enough to take care of their lawn themselves. I think that would be like maybe one tiny little data point in the fancy white constellation. Anyway, it doesn't matter. It doesn't matter. Scott, how are you doing today?
I'm good, man. Yeah, things are good. Just trying to get some work done before heading off to another family party. So that's the life, though, right?
That is the life.
Comics.
So obviously, we knew each other pretty well, and we've tabled together together and next to each other and all of that. So I know this, for me, it's it's merely review. But for the audience, please introduce yourself, your comic, your podcast, all of that stuff so they know. Yeah. I did put the Accidental Aliens link in the description. I can add any other links you want later. But...
Okay, cool. Yeah, that works. I'm Scott Lost, the creator and artist of The Second Shift and Wanderers of Melisande for the Accidental Aliens. I was a pro wrestler for 10 years before that, but I've been drawing comics ever since I was a little kid. So the 10-year break was literally that. So I was drawing comics all the way up until I was 20. Then, wrestling at the time was insanely popular, like from 99 to 2000. So around that time I was getting more and more into it. And then in 2000, I met a friend who was my first tag partner, and he's like, hey, we should go train. We used to wrestle in the backyard, like safe stuff. I would like write the matches out on my trampoline, and then we'd perform the matches and all of that stuff. So so we wrestled, and he was just like, hey, I think we should go train. So we went up to LA. His girlfriend had found a flyer for Ultimate University, which was the federation where John Cena started. That's where he trained, and he first started wrestling. So we went up there. We saw a bunch of guys our size wrestling, and we're like, man, we got to do this. So I stopped drawing, and then I was a pro wrestler for 10 years. And so I made a pretty good name.
How old were you when that happened?
20. Yeah.
Wow.
So yeah, I started in 2000, and so I was 20, and then I stopped when I was 30. So 2010. I gave it 10 years. I made a good name for myself, traveled the world, and it was cool. But towards the end, it was starting to feel like work. It was no longer fun to do. It was like a chore. So I was just like, oh man, like this turned into a job. Like it shouldn't. There should still be some excitement there. It's just like I've been drawing comics for close to 10 years now, 9 years. And it's still fun to this very day. Like I'm excited to do it. And that's like the benefit of when you do something that you actually give a shit about. It's like, yeah, it's hard work, but you care about it. You're excited to go do it. That's the difference between a career and a job. You're actually like your job and you want to go do those things. So yeah, for me, I still love drawing comic books, but as far as wrestling goes, it was definitely a job. It was something I had to do to go make some money. And it was no longer fun. So like in year 8.5, I was like, I think I'm done doing this. And one of my friends convinced me, just write it out to 10. You said you'd give it 10. You said you'd give it till 30, and you got a year and a half. You never know. Maybe you'll make it in this next year and a half, So like you do the independence and, it's fine. But like the goal obviously is WWE or wrestling in Japan or something like that full time. But where the market was in the wrestling world at that time was terrible. Like no one was making money around that time. So you have to be the top guy to make money. And so like all the top people, they were making dough, but everyone under that it wasn't enough to get by. So so I made the decision. And then like the last year and a half was really fun because I stopped kind of caring about what people wanted, like in a match. So like, this is equivalent to chasing trends, I guess, in comic books, So it's just like, all right, every match I was trying to have the best match on the card. So as opposed to just wrestling for myself and things that I wanted to do, I was like thinking about trying to have the best match on the show. And then so that kind of number one makes it less fun. And so that last year and a half was amazing because I was like, I'm just going to fuck around. I'm going to do what I want to do because I know this is all gravy now. It's just like, none of this matters. I'm writing it out. And the funny thing was I just started having fun again. And I kind of started loving wrestling again, but it was one of those things.
Not enough to move your age 30 deadline.
Exactly. Yeah. So it was just like, I'm starting to love it again and starting to be really fun. And people started reacting to it. They liked my match. Like, I mean, I was popular enough, like at the time, like that wasn't an issue, but I felt my popularity growing as well. So, it was interesting. It's just like, man, and I think that's what changed my perspective on comics, or made me think about comics in a different way. It's just like, do the comic that you want to do, because more than likely someone else out there is going to like that comic as well. And that was part of my like wrestling journey, was like figuring that out, even it was in the midnight hour. But it's helping me with comics today. So, which is a good thing.
It's a great lesson. And lucky that you learned it. Because how,
Yes.
I mean, how would you have otherwise? You know,
Right.
hard to say.
Yeah, it's interesting, like, comparing wrestling to comics, which I do a lot.
Yeah.
Like, I feel like I mention it too much, like, on the Making Comics podcast.
No,
Maybe
in
not.
fact, that's part of what I was hoping you would talk about today because I think it's interesting. I mean,
Oh, okay.
I think, well, first of all, I think your background is super interesting, and I'm sure other people would think so too. But then also, like, what I'm sort of interested in the topic of what we mine from our dead ends, to use in our,
Right.
what kind of nuggets did we pull out of that mine that just didn't go anywhere that we're now using in our current endeavor? And it seems like you
Yeah,
have a few examples of that. So
yeah, absolutely. So, like, when I first started wrestling, I think it's like when people, I mean, not you, your first comic was pretty killer right off the bat. But I think when you first start something, you're trying to figure out the formula of it. You're like, how
yeah,
does this work exactly? So, like, when I started wrestling, my favorite wrestler was Bret Hart.
mhm,
So I was constantly doing things like Bret Hart. And then after a while, and this applies to art as well, you can draw like your favorite artist. After a while, you start to draw like you. So instead of doing everything like Bret Hart, some of those things remained. It was just ingrained in me. I learned how to do it that way, so I
yeah,
always did it that way. But other things over time started to change, and it became me, like the things that I did. So
yeah,
my wrestling started to morph. So as opposed to being this very traditional American style wrestling technical wrestler, I started integrating things that I was interested in. So I got interested in martial arts. I did taekwondo as a kid. I did while I was wrestling, I was doing judo.
mhm,
So I started incorporating that stuff into my wrestling, and it made my wrestling so much more interesting. Like in my opinion, like it, and I
yeah,
think the crowd reacted as well. And I became who I was in the second half of my wrestling career, because I really nailed that home. I mailed it home. I was just like, no, 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 you keep tapping into this. This is a good vein to tap here. And
yeah,
yeah, so a lot of good stuff came out of it. It became this meld of like Eastern and Western wrestling combined into one, and it was like, martial arts mixed with wrestling, and I think I found like a very good balance to it all,
yeah,
and I find that to be happening with my art today. So like, I started off like if you pick up Second Shift Trade One, it's very American standard comic books, like superhero comic books, and that's what I'm into, and
mhm,
you know, that's okay for you people out there that are
right,
was it tights and cape kind of guy.
yeah,
That's okay because I am. So if you're a fan out there who likes tights and capes, and that's a okay. So that's what Second Shift, the first trade was like, and you can see as time goes on, there's more of a manga influence to my work. And the interesting part about it is, like, I didn't read manga growing up, and when I was wrestling, I didn't watch like Japanese wrestling, pure Russo. I didn't watch that growing up either. But it was
mhm,
just something that started naturally coming into how I do things. And so that's happening right now with my art. It's just like, and it's not like purely manga. There's a lot of manga influence, but there's a lot of like Marvel Capcom influence in there. There's like a lot of video game style because like I didn't play a ton of video games growing up, but what I did play was like X-Men Children of the Atom, Marvel Capcom. Like I
yeah.
love those series.
So
And
did I. Yeah,
so those artists too, there's artists that draw in that style like Eddie Nunez. Eddie Nunez is like a pretty big influence on me. And so guys that had more of a cartoony vibe to them, that's kind of working their way into my style and it's feeling more natural and it's honestly it's way more fun.
what's interesting, I want to, there was something you said that was interesting and I was a little envious of. Um, it occurred to me for the first time how
Sexually attracted you are
lucky,
to me.
what's that?
Sexually attracted you are to me. You just
Well,
realized it.
that of course, I mean, that's a granted, like, just we'll
Across the board.
stipulate that. Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Yes. But no, I was thinking about how you were lucky and it must have been very nourishing to have that experience of wrestling where you could try something new, try a different approach, say, like, I'm going to do it this way instead, or I'm going to come in with this mentality rather than that mentality. and not only see how it felt right then, but immediately get a crowd reaction. Like
Yeah,
you get like immediate feedback, which we don't like doing what we're doing now. That's not how it works. Like it's more like a movie kind of thing where you might like you hear about this when actors talk about they shot their thing and then 18 months later it comes out and you're just kind of waiting and hoping it works, And like
yeah,
there's this huge delay in seeing like, let me see if these choices paid off. Where you got to have like an immediate, like a comedian or a stage actor or something, immediately know like, is this the right or wrong direction? Is the audience with me or am I losing
yeah, absolutely. I want to hop back to something you were saying before I got on. You
them?
had
Okay.
mentioned like going to a concert and feeling the vibe, and it was like a different type of energy. I was
Yeah.
taking a couple of notes there, and like one of them is comedy. Comedy is one of those things where
Yeah.
like watching a stand up like special on TV is cool, but going
Right.
to a show, it's a different vibe. Like you can feel
Different.
it, like you can feel the room. So yeah, definitely with wrestling, it's the same thing. Like you said, it's instant instant response on what you're doing, if it's good or not, and or if it's even like, am I able to pull this off, and like
Right.
that's something you're doing with art, and I find it to
That's
be as
true. Like, does this even work? Like,
Mhm,
does this, like, am I even able to actualize this?
right. Yeah,
Right.
and it's so similar, like the parallels to comics and wrestling, it's a lot. And
Yeah.
with wrestling, you're trying stuff that day. Like, is this gonna work? And you try it out, and it might work and it might not work, and like, oh shit, that worked really good. So it's a constant. That's a constant, and I find that to be for me right now as my style is growing. I find that to be a constant as well. I'm not limiting myself in one way or another. And that I feel like I was doing that when I first started wrestling. Like I was limiting what I could do because well, Bret Hart never did that, or Shawn Michaels never did that.
Right.
So it was just
Right.
kind of like I kept myself in this bubble, this box. And then it's just later on I learned, oh, like I'm not supposed to do that. Like when the first time I realized that in wrestling was this super old wrestler. He was from WCW back in the day, and then WWE absorbed them. His name was Fit Finley. He became a backstage agent. But then like they needed him to do something, so he came out and he wrestled, and he was doing shit in the ring that I was like, I've never thought about using the ring like that. So if you've seen a wrestling ring, okay, it's square, right?
Mhm.
There's an apron. So apron is the thing is like a cloth or a vinyl that hides what's under the ring. So it can be elastic and can be movable. You can tie it on and everything, and WWE specifically. So something he did was he was on the outside of the ring, standing on the ground, and then so this is like floor level, right? So the
Mhm.
guy's running, and he was going to do a baseball slide and kick him in the face. But what
Uh-huh.
Fit Finley did was he grabbed the apron, and when the guy slid, he pulled the apron up, so the guy got stuck in the apron, and then he
Yeah.
started beating the shit out of him. And I was like, "This is
What a fun
amazing."
idea. Yeah.
Yeah, like I've never thought of using the ring as a weapon. And so
Yeah.
from that point on, my wrestling changed, my style changed because he took me out of the box, the square that was
Right.
that ring, the squared circle. He took me out of it. And I was like, you can use the ring in other kind of ways. And then
Yeah.
so I started using like the ring posts. They're basically the things that stabilize the ring. They're the corners essentially. It's a giant steel post. So I started running around like the outside of it and then like grabbing the pole and like swinging around it and sliding in between the ring and the post and kicking the guy. And I
Yeah.
just started using the ring in different types of ways. And
Yeah.
I started using the ring apron um, as a weapon as well. So I would like, it's called a tie clench. So if you grab someone like from behind their head like that, so I would grab them like that and I would lift them up and I would slam them chest first into the apron, and like no one was doing stuff like that. So like for me, my whole world changed just seeing this one guy do this one thing. And like for wrestling, I feel, or excuse me, for comics, to bring this back to comic books, I know Squatch is probably getting upset over this whole conversation. The
Don't
comics
you
and
worry. No, look, I gave up trying to appease Squatch years ago. It's just impossible. Don't worry about
he's just like this squatchy troll guy that lives on your comment section and just ribs you the whole time. Um, so the thing in comics that kind of changed that for me recently was this artist Simone de Mayo, and he does We Only Find Them When They're Dead. He's
Oh
right
yeah.
now he's just doing a ton of cover work for DC. He did one book of White Knight, White Knight, Red Hood. And
Okay.
so, but it was We Only Find Them When They're Dead. That's what kind of switched something in my brain. And he was just using really like canted angles, Dutch angles, just the way he formed his pages, his panels, the way they flowed. I was like, man, that's so different. Like that's just, and it kind of just changed how I thought about comics. And I think
Yeah.
that's when things really started to change for my art. Like you can really see it in issue 11, which was my Drawtober issue turned fully formed comic book.
Oh
Uh,
yes. Yeah. Yeah.
so for the audience that doesn't know what that is, so Drawtober is an event. It's much like Inktober. It's obviously in October. The Inktober guy is a dick, so I don't use his prompts, and so I decided to do Drawtober. And
Right.
because he was suing artists for using Inktober on their books, which is like a
That's
real
right.
shit thing to do. So
That's right.
anyway, I started doing Drawtober, and I'm like creating my own prompts. But the thing is, I don't want to stop drawing comic books. Like I have to draw comic books. The idea of just drawing one thing a day and it being kind of pointless or
Yeah.
useless, like in my opinion,
Yeah.
um, just for me. Everyone else, like if you like doing it, that's cool. I have no control over what you do for your art. Like obviously, more power to you. But for me, I like to draw comic books. So the thing I decided to do was create a prompt list and have that be a comic book, essentially a panel. Each day was a panel. So I would think about this. So I'd create this prompt list, and I'm like, okay, how can I make this a story? And I would do little thumbnails of the whole month. And then on October 1st, I would have my thumbnail ready and I'd work on top of it and I would draw the piece. And then that would be my image for the day. And then I started arranging. So after it was all said and done, I was like, okay, how can I arrange these into pages? And so, much like drawing comics for the first time, it was a learning experience. So I was
Right.
like, oh man, I really should have done this image landscape. And I didn't because they were all, the standard orientation. And I was just like, oh man, I really should have done that landscape. And so the following year, I learned to adjust. But that year, I was like, I'm gonna have to draw a little bit more. Like okay, it cuts the guy's head off here, so I need to draw it up here, and or it needs to be wider. So just
Yeah.
like little things like that. And I
Yeah.
figured out a good flow for everything, and I made it a comic book. Sent it over to did the flat, sent it over to my colorist, and then boom, that was issue 11. And so it's just like it was 31 days of fighting of two characters. And then I condensed that down, I think, to like 24, 25.
Yeah.
And that was my issue 11. And it was really fun to do. But I, I realized when I was doing it that my panel layout was changing. The way I was drawing was changing. It was just like those Marvel Capcom, those manga influences were shining through. And rewind a little bit, Simone de Mayo, the first place I discovered him was TMNT versus Power Rangers. My
Mhm.
buddy is obsessed with both of those properties, and I go to the comic store, and he goes, "Hey, can you pick up these issues for me?" I said, "Yeah, of course." And so I was flipping through it, and I'm like, "The art in this is so awesome! Like the storytelling is great, just the way he's doing things, and he was adding these flourishes to it." And I realized I was like, I've seen those before, but not in like American comic books. Where have I seen those? And they were from manga. So
Yeah.
like when characters clash with weapons or just punches or something, there's just like this flicker of light that happens or like
Yeah.
an explosion of light. And
Yeah.
I was like, man, that's so fucking cool. I was like, wow,
Yeah.
I've never even thought about incorporating that into American comic books. I've seen it before. I've just never thought about it. And then so in that Drawtober issue, I was like, I'm experimenting. This is just all for fun. So I just started doing that on the page. And then when I handed them over to my colorist, I really like how he interpreted them. And I was like, yeah, this is something I'm gonna just do moving forward. Like it's just something I enjoy doing. So that's like changing, my art and how I look at comics.
Yeah. It's I just I'm kind of rediscovering my love for manga. And I'm a couple books at a time. I'm buying the Hokuto no Ken, like the Fist of the North Star series that
Okay.
they've put in hardback. And I just remember now, I think we're a similar age. Like well, you're a little younger than me, but I discovered comics in the 80s. So and it was mostly Marvel that I was favoring. So there was a look to those comics. And because that's the first kind of comic I was reading, like X-Men and GI Joe and stuff like that in like the late
Okay.
80s, that has always been my, like when I picture what a comic looks like in my head, that's always what I picture, just because that's what I first found. But
Yeah, I also started late 80s. So the first comic I ever got was from my classmate whose uncle was Will Portatio. And like so he brought a bunch of comic books into the class, and kids have no filter or whatever, no shame. So I was like,
yeah,
"Can I have one?"
just have
And
one. Yeah, sure.
yeah, because like he got them for free. So why wouldn't I be able to have one for free? That was
Right.
the thought of it, right?
Yeah.
And so he had a bunch of X-Men. Obviously, Wills was drawing X-Men at the time. And but he had like some other random Marvel titles, and one of them was Alpha Flight 23. He goes, "Here, you can have this one." And so I was like, "Oh, cool!" And years later, I discovered it was a John Byrne cover. It's an awesome cover. It's like
Okay.
Sasquatch and shoot, what's her name? She is the kind of like the sorceress on the team. Is it like White
Oh,
Bird or something like that? Or so anyway, she's like a shape changer, a
yeah.
shapeshifter. And so it was 2 Sasquatches fighting on the cover, and I was just like, "Oh, this is so cool." And
Yeah.
I was like, "I don't know who Alpha Flight is, but hey, I have a free comic book." And so,
Right.
yeah, I started in that same area too,
Yeah.
that same time frame in the
I
'80s.
think
So John
I'm
Byrne,
pretty
Mark Silvestri.
yeah, and I'm pretty sure I think one of the first comics I ever got, I think it was Secret Wars 2,
Oh.
and I think it might have been like a pack in with a toy or something.
Oh,
Like
okay,
I
yeah.
don't remember I don't remember picking that out at the, at the newsstand, like on the rack. I think somehow it came with something that I got.
It
And it
probably
was
did. I
totally
think it came with those figures.
Beyonder and everything, like all that sort of stuff. And in retrospect, not the greatest of the Secret Wars, but like at the time, it was like, this is awesome. Like it was just really exciting and cool. And it was, I think, the first crossover. It was for sure the first crossover
Yes,
comic I'd ever read,
yes.
where I
What
was
how
like,
old were you at that time?
boy, that's a good question. I don't know, like maybe 11 or 12. We'd have to check the date to see when that came out. But I was
Yeah,
like,
and those were completely aimed towards kids, and that's what
yeah,
that crossover existed to sell toys. They wanted a toy line. They're like, okay, well, what can we do? Like, how do we get everyone to realize all these characters are in the same universe? Okay, we'll do Secret Wars.
see that? Well,
And
that must have been it. Because, like I said, I think I must have bought like a Spider-Man figure or something, or a Wolverine
yeah,
figure. Might even be a Wolverine figure because I have a distinct memory of a Wolverine figure that had like clip-on claws that clipped around his wrist.
yeah,
And
yep,
I remember that annoyed me because it's like, that's not how they come out. But like,
yeah. And then
that's how you could do it in and out. Like you just
at
pop
that
them on.
time,
Yeah,
right?
exactly.
Yeah, and then years later, in the early '90s, they released the Marvel superheroes line, and he had one where it was a spring in the form. So if you pull the spring back, and then it had like a latch. So if you, oops, I'm doing this off camera. Fuck, I can't
Yeah.
realize the arms here.
Yeah.
So it had like a spring in the form, and
Yeah.
then like latch over. Like so, you would pull it and then go like this, and
And
that's
it
how
could
you
pop out.
pause. Yeah, and then you just flip that switch, and they would pop out. And I was like, oh, this is so cool.
Yeah, so well, see, this is yeah, so 84. That sounds about right. I would have been probably about 10, and
Oh, looks like my writer Ed's blowing up the chat over
yes,
here.
and he's wow, that late. Secret Wars 2 is that late, I think, which is the one that I encountered. I think the original one was, you're probably right, was probably like 82, or I don't know, like something like that. But again, in retrospect, not the greatest comic, but I loved it because it was, I was just the right age, and I had a comic, and now it's like, I just remember, and it was also, I think, the first time I saw real violence on the part of Wolverine, where I think at one
Oh,
point
okay.
he tries to shank the Beyonder. I like it, and he just goes after him. And I'd only ever seen Wolverine attack Sentinels and stuff, like where it didn't. But this is the first time I saw him like run through a human being, the Beyonder. But I mean, like his shirt was all torn up, and he had these holes where it had come out the back and everything. I was like, oh my
Yeah,
god, Wolverine
I
really
like.
tried to murder that guy. I'm sorry, are you still there?
I did.
Am I chopping up for you? You're chopping up for me.
I'm up.
Let's see here. Let me see if I'm going to try to do some things to see if they help. Okay.
All right. I turned off the Wi-Fi. I turned off Wi-Fi on my phone. Hopefully that.
Maybe that was it. Yeah, maybe that was it, because that was. Okay. But yes.
So we have pretty good. We have pretty good reception here. Normally, we have a high internet, so I don't know why it would do that. But anyway.
Yeah, I don't know either. I think it would have to be your side, because I think if I dropped out, you would have the channel to yourself. So
it must have been, because you stayed consistent. You didn't chop you at all.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Well, it's fine now. So
yes, I would think I like the choice of wording with shank.
Yeah. I don't know, like what would
prison.
Yeah, right. Well, because stabbing doesn't sound right. Stabbing doesn't sound right for Wolverine. I mean, yes, it's stabbing, but it's a little more gnarly than that. So we'll say
yeah.
Yeah.
I like it. It's good.
But so again, that like look is how I think of a comic, which in retrospect, and this is no shade, like I love it. It's very nostalgic. It's a very simple kind of approach to drawing. It's like it's
specific yeah. for sure. Like it's interesting
when I first encountered manga, it was, I think the biggest shock about it to me was how meticulously detailed everything was. Like these people went bananas drawing. I mean, these were really, really dense illustrations, some of these, and like that's what I'm remembering now when I'm going through Fist of the North Star again, is like these. Like one of these pages would take me forever. I don't know how they're doing it. Is this a team? Is this like?
It is. It is a team.
Is it a team?
Yes. So the mangaka, the main artists, they have assistants who are assigned certain things. So like, whoever's on the title, whoever the main artist is, they usually handle the characters. From what I understand, this is from what I understand. They handle most of the characters, and they direct their assistants on what they want for the background. They might, I'm not sure, maybe they even rough it out to give the assistants an idea of what they're thinking. But the assistants go in and they take care of the background elements. So, because these are coming out mostly on a weekly basis, which is insane to me. So you do X amount of pages per week, it's probably 6 or 7 pages per week. So the mangaka, they go in and they knock out all the figures, and they go, okay, well, you guys handle these things while I'm working on this. So it's kind of bonkers.
It's got to be the same with Junji Ito, who I like discovered a few years ago and then went and bought almost all the books I could. But all of his horror books are like this thick. Yeah. And what's a little lame about it, I don't think you wouldn't be able to get away with this in the States, maybe because it's Japanese or something. He's the only person listed in any credits anywhere. And there's no way he's doing every single part of it. I mean, unless he's just some sort of savant that can crank this stuff out. Like each one of his books is like a little hardcover novel of just illustrations. Yeah,
I'm curious how that works, because I think almost not all, but a good majority of the mangaka, I think it's the same thing. Or they use, most of them use assistants. So I don't know if they actually list their assistants or not. I don't know how that works. Like ghostwriting, right? Like you don't list the ghostwriter. So I don't know if that's the case, or if it's just like a personal referral, and they go, oh, this guy's been working on his books for this long, so let's give him a new series. And then like after they've been assistant for so long, they kind of start their own books. I'm not sure the exact process of it all. But the first thing that I was exposed to was not like manga. It was or manga. It was anime. So I
Yeah.
remember my sister was dating this guy, and he was a comic nerd. And so when he would come to hang out with my sister, he would bring me like a short box because I'd be like, "Oh, can I see some of your comics?" So he'd bring over a short box while I was hanging out with my sister, and I would
Getting
go
in good with
through.
your brother. That's very sly. It's very sly.
Yeah, yeah, it's a good move. So
Yeah, it's
like I
not
was like,
it's
"All
not
right,"
bad. Yeah.
and that's where I discovered Long Shot. He had Long Shot, and he had Death in the Family. And like those are the two titles I really remember just like staring at, like, oh my gosh, what is this? And so like Art Adams was my first comic love. He's like my favorite artist. Like he's the first artist that I really noticed that this guy is better than all of the other guys. Like, how come this guy doesn't draw more things? He should draw all the
Yeah.
things. And
Yeah.
like the first time I really saw his work, and I didn't know at the time, was X-Men Classic #1. He drew the cover for that, and I bought it, and the interior wasn't the same, and I was very upset. And then years later, I discovered Long Shot in that guy's long short box, and I
Mhm.
tried it. Can I have it? And he goes, "No, you can't have it." So I was trying to get him to give me them. I was like, "He has so
It
many."
worked out once. It worked out once asking if you could
Yeah,
have a
why
comic,
not?
so
Why not?
just
You,
keep trying.
the worst case scenario is they say no, and then best case scenario, you have a new comic book.
Right,
So,
right.
yeah, and then one day he brought over Akira. He goes, "Oh,"
Uh,
he goes, "Have you ever heard of Akira or manga or anime?" And I was just like, "No, I don't know what that is." And he goes,
yeah,
"Okay." And then so the next time he brought me Akira, and I watched it, and I was just like,
yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, how is this that good? Like, how I don't understand how drawings can be this good. And
right.
like to this day, it still holds up. Like you watch
It
that,
does. And how
and you're
old is that? That's like '80s or something, right? And it still holds. I've been meaning to rewatch. I watch every few years I rewatch it. And I've been itching. Like it's coming due. I feel like I need to watch it again. But it really holds up.
oh, Snowbird. Thanks, Ed. Snowbird is the sorceress that's on Alpha Flight. Yeah. So
Oh, I
yeah,
missed it.
honestly, Ed would know a lot too about how like the mangaka stuff works better than I would. Um, but he's the one that clued me in that the movie, the Akira the movie, it's a combination of chapters. It's not even like they're like, well, how are we gonna fit this all in one thing? And so they kind of took aspects of later editions and kind
Yeah,
of put it in there. And so it's like the story kind of makes sense and it kind of doesn't make sense. And
yeah.
it's that element because the whole story's not in there. And I was just like, oh, okay.
My
Um,
local shop has two of the giant Akira box sets, which I believe you have, right?
yeah,
That's like the complete.
it's right there.
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. It's hiding behind actually Akira, and this is a paper mache of one of my main characters in Second Shift that I made when I was in 12th grade. So
Wow.
that's kind
I
of
didn't realize.
yes,
Very cool. Yeah, I've every time I'm in that shop, I look at them and think about it. I think about like hauling off this giant crate of Akira, and I
dude.
always because it's like $180 or something there. I don't know if you can get it cheaper, but
I
and
think it
so
was. I think it's um, retails for 200. So if you can get it for under 200, that's a good deal. I think I got mine on a crazy deal. I think I got it for like 120. And I just so happened, yeah, it was crazy. It was like maybe 2 years ago at this point, 2 to 3 years ago. And I was like, I was watching a YouTube show and they were reviewing the Akira. I think they were reviewing the Akira box set. And I was like,
yeah,
I wonder how much that goes for. Cause it was already old when I was watching the video. It had already been out a while. And I was like, man, that's just so cool. And I want to read it. I still haven't read it. And just the art so beautiful. I'll flip through and check out the art. But like, so I looked it up on Amazon, and someone just so happened to be selling it for 120. It was the only one. And I bought that shit with the quickness. And I was
120. I would swoop. I would
yeah,
swoop. Yeah, because like I said, the lowest I think I've ever seen is like 179 or something like that. And it's like
yeah,
that is well outside of my impulse buy range. So it's like
right.
I can't do it. I can't do it.
I
But
get it.
120. I mean, it's like just knowing what it normally goes for
And
sure.
honestly,
Easy.
it's so beautiful that like I still haven't read it because I don't want to mess the books up.
Right.
So like
Right.
my because like my addictions are collecting. So it's like my
Yeah.
collector brain is like, no, you're gonna mess it up. Don't screw it up. Just buy the soft covers and read the soft covers. So I already spent 120, but apparently I'm going to spend, $20 per soft volume to finish
Right.
reading this. So, yeah,
Right,
so
because
stupid.
even though you have them, you're not. No, it's well, it's the same for me. Like I've got my artist edition spread all over that usually I buy, and then the day I get them home, I'll like flip through. Usually, I'll take some pictures and send them to you. Like, look at this,
Yeah,
look at this, look at it.
yeah,
And then
flip
I
that
kind
out.
of don't want to touch it again because it's like, oh, it's too nice. It's too nice, which is
Yeah, I have my Jim Lee X-Men edition there. That what's funny about that one too is some of the pages aren't even Jim Lee. Like I was like, this is Wills. Like I can see it. Like so when they were working for Marvel, they were Homage Studios like back then. So when they went off to do Image together, they were Homage Studios. But that's what they called their studio when they worked together. And so a lot of the pages are combined work. It's just like the pages they would cut the pages too, or they
yeah,
would hey, you work on these panels on the top, I'll work on these panels on the bottom. And there's a couple pages in there that it's mostly Wills. And it was and like I could tell by looking at it, like
yeah,
if you're an artist or just someone that pays attention to detail, you can like someone's art is practically their face. Like you
yeah,
can just it by looking at it. You're like, that's Jim Lee, that's Wills Portaccio, that's Gary Hodges. So you just
yeah.
like look at it enough, you know who drew what. And I was looking at these pages and I was like, why is this in here? And then Jim Lee did a video and he was flipping through it and he goes, oh yeah, Wills drew this. And he was just talking about it. And he was
Just
just
like
like,
no big deal.
that's how I learned how they did it. And he was talking about it in the video. He goes, yeah, we would split the pages up. And so Wills did actually most of the stuff on this page. He goes, I drew this little figure down here. So he's flipping through his own artist editions doing his work.
Just calling
I was
out
like,
like that's not mine. That's not mine. Yeah.
well, it's kind of crazy. It's like, why would you not vet that? Like, why would you not make sure that was his work? And
Yeah. Well, was
also,
he even involved? Because I just did I just got
yeah,
that Judge
probably.
Dredd artist edition by, is it, I never know how to pronounce his name. Is it Bolland? Brian Boland or
Brian
Bolland?
Boland.
Or,
I say
yeah, right.
Boland, but
I don't know if it's,
I'm
maybe it's
American, so I
Boland.
don't know if I'm saying it right. Right.
I've never heard his name said. It shows like when you're very more written oriented, where it's like I don't know, like the guy who did the Killing Joke
Yeah.
cover and all,
Right.
all that. But
I thought it was Constantine. Apparently, it's Constantine. So I mean, what
is
the
it
hell do I
really?
know? Mhm.
All I've ever heard was Constantine. Well, whatever. But so
Yeah, it's because a
I
bunch of
picked up
Americans are
his
saying it. But when
Apex
the Brits
edition.
start saying it, it's when the Brits start saying it, they say Constantine, and they're the ones that
Well,
created him. So I'm just like,
but
okay,
they
well,
also
that's
say aluminium, so I don't know. Like I don't
that's
know what to do
true.
with that. So,
That's true. Yeah, I have
but
to
I
read some
got hit. Brian name
Boland.
undetermined's
Yeah,
artist Apex edition of Judge Dredd, which is phenomenal. Like it's really
yeah,
really fun to look at, and um, I caught an interview with him somewhere, and someone was asking him about it, saying like, "Hey, so what was your involvement in putting together Apex Edition?" And I don't remember specifically, but I remember the gist of it was like none, like not really. Like he might have
yeah,
shared some work, a little bit, like, "Oh, here's some stuff." But I don't know what they're putting in it, and I don't know how they're putting it together. And like it was a whole. And he might have. I could be conflating. Don't hold me to this. But he also, I remember him being having kind of a dim view of artist editions because he
mm,
didn't love that you could see all the tape and the whiteout and the yellow pages and the corrections. Like because to I think, again, this could be somebody else, I could be conflating, but I remember some artist was saying, no, I see this is like showing the pencils. Like the cleanup is a part of the process. The final product is the work, not this intermediate part where you're seeing the kind of all the little rigging to make this thing work. Like I would never intend for someone to see that. Like this is for, I want you to see the finished thing, which is clean and
right.
perfect and lovely. And I thought that was interesting. I sort of can get it. But
I can see that 100% making sense for Brian Boland. Like how
yeah,
clean and pristine his work is.
yeah,
That 100% makes sense for his personality type. So
yeah,
yeah, I get that. I've come around myself. I've come to like the rough stuff, basically,
Yeah.
and it's just kind of something you almost have
Oh,
to be
I've heard
taught.
you like the rough stuff. I'm sorry.
Oh
No,
yeah, oh, yeah.
sorry.
You know,
I
you
I
know.
couldn't resist. I couldn't
Yeah,
resist.
yeah,
Go ahead.
yeah.
Continue.
You'll
Please
find
continue.
out. You'll find out at Phoenix Fan Fusion 2013.
Oh no. Oh no. I
So,
think I might be busy that weekend. I don't know. But
yeah, did Keith talk to you about what's going on with that too?
no. What is going on with that?
So he's double booked because he's doing Monster Palooza or
Oh
whatever,
no.
I think, or Monster Con, or I think it was Monster Palooza. But
Okay.
what he's going to do is he's going to do Phoenix Fan Fusion for Friday and Saturday, and then he will leave us to go fly back home and then do Monster Palooza on Sunday. So you and I
Okay.
will be the only ones manning the tables on Sunday. So you'll have a
All
full
right.
spread. Yeah.
Wow. Well, so I mean, we could talk about this off the air, but do I need to maybe pass him a little more money, or how does like I mean he's
Whatever total he sent you is the total, so we're good.
okay. Okay.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. No,
All
it's
right.
his choice. He ran it by me and he was just like, "Hey, look, is this leave you in the lurch a little bit?" Just usually how it works is I drive up to him to LA and then he drives to Phoenix. And
Yeah.
then drive back and then I drive back down south.
Oh
So
yeah. So then how are you gonna do it?
I'm gonna drive.
Okay.
So the loose plan, and we'll see if this is still what it's going to be. Because so the loose plan that him and I discussed was I drive up to LA, pick him up, and then we go to Phoenix together. And then that way we split gas and everything. And then he flies out back home. His wife picks him up and he does his thing or whatever.
Okay.
And then the loose plan at this time is my girlfriend is going to go stay with her friend who lives in Phoenix and she's going to drive back with me. So
Oh, great. So you
yeah,
won't
so
be
that's the loose plan as of right now, but I need to see if that makes sense for me because he said he can fly out both ways and it doesn't bother him. So I don't know. My girlfriend was saying that it's cheaper or it's closer to drive here straight to Phoenix, San Diego to Phoenix. So I was
yeah.
like, yeah, I don't know if, and her friend that lives there says it's one tank of gas. So I don't know if it makes sense for me to
Yeah.
drive 2 hours out of my way and then 4 to 6 or whatever. So
I don't know. It's
yeah,
yeah.
I would have to map it out. But the company, on the drive out factors in. So we'll
That
see.
helps. It helps because I don't know about you. I don't know how you are with road trips. I've driven to San Diego, a number of times in my life, both with someone and by myself. By myself is about my limit to be in a car alone.
Yeah.
Like that by the time I get there, I'm like, oh Jesus Christ, I'm glad that's over. Like it's just at my limit. So I'm clearly not a huge road trip guy where it's like, let's
Right.
drive to Yellowstone. Like I wouldn't be able to. No, no, no. These people who talk about 12-hour drives in a day or something, it's like no. Like I
I
would need good company to be able to sit and talk the whole
That's what it
time.
is. I've done it. I've driven from San Diego to the Bay,
Yeah.
to Oakland with one of my buddies, and he loves to drive. So,
Okay.
and he has a company car, so he doesn't give a shit about mileage or gas
Yeah.
because the company pays for it. So, he'll go like, "Hey, do you want to go up to see a Warriors game?" And he at the time he had a Warriors season ticket, so I would like, "Fuck yeah, I want to go to a Warriors game." So he'd pick me up. We would drive up to the Bay. We would
Yeah.
do our stops or whatever. And I was like, "Dude, do you want me to drive?" He goes, "I got it. I'm cool." It's a company vehicle, so I don't think I'm technically allowed to drive it anyway.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice to do those road trips.
How
If
far
you
is
have
that? San Diego to Bay Area. How many hours is that?
10 to 12.
Oof.
Yeah,
Wow.
I think I could be
Yeah.
completely wrong, but I mean they feel like 10, like
Yeah, that's smart.
when
Wow.
we're in the car. But he's cool and he's easy to talk to. So yeah, if you
Yeah.
have good company, like Keith is super easy
Yeah.
to talk to, and
Yeah.
he likes to talk. So then like I could just listen, which is cool because I talk a lot. So it's just nice to like when I'm with Keith. It's funny because if I'm with anyone else, as you can tell by watching this episode, I talk a lot. But Keith talks more than I do. So it's interesting for the dynamic to switch where I'm just like more quiet and listening. And
Yeah.
so it's kind of fun, like in that sense. It's just like, okay, I got to just
It,
chill out.
it is interesting, and I've noticed that with you and Keith because I think of both and myself included. I think of all three of us as talkers, but I've noticed that like when Keith gets going, like it's actually a little neat how you can immediately default into just quietly, and just completely let him just go and go and go, and like you're happy to just to sit and listen. Where I think I tend to want to I hear something that it makes me think, think of something, and I want to jump in there. Yeah, I think you're probably a better listener than me. But.
Well, that's something we had to figure out for the pod, so like we learned how to signal. So like you guys are live here, but if one of us need to talk, like if like exactly what you said, if the other one's talking and says something interesting, we just do this. And then that means you want to double Dutch in. So it's like, hey, you need to slow down a little bit so I can jump in there. And then
give
so
me a
we
small opening. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. So we've worked it out to where it's just like, okay. And then the other one just goes, okay, yeah, I got you. And like we got it to the point where I know Keith saw me, and I'll just like put my finger down, and then I could feel him wrapping up. And
yeah, he's finding a place to land. So yeah, no, and I think that yours was probably the first. Which, by the way, Making Comics, the podcast, it's great. Yes. Everyone should subscribe. Everyone should listen. But I think your guys's was the first podcast I did. I had done YouTube shows where you don't have to think about that as much.
Right.
Because you see everybody. It's like a real, like in front of somebody, you can tell if somebody's, like wanting to talk. Yeah, and crosstalk is less of a problem on YouTube. But on a podcast, it's horrendous. So I think yours was the first where what you kind of gave me that, how that works. And it was interesting.
I try to do that for everyone that comes on the pod, just so they know. Like we had someone on, we completely ignored it. And it was just like, come on, man. Like we told you how this thing works, because what happens is one person can dominate more than the other. One person has a tendency to talk more or want to get their point across more, but you have to respect the finger point. You have to respect the because it's like, I have something to say and I've raised my hand, teacher. So it's like, I'm next, so you got to follow it. And they weren't. It was a good episode, but it was one of those things where it's like, man, we told him the rules and he's not following it at all. So it was interesting. It
takes me back to the arcade days when two people would be playing X-Men or Street Fighter or whatever, and you'd put a quarter up. Yeah, you put your quarter on the thing, and sometimes somebody would walk up and have no idea and drop a quarter in. Like it's like, no, there's a system here. Like there's an unstated system here. But
this is the ecosystem of the arcade, and you're fucking with it.
This is how this works. Get up to speed. But
what are you working on today?
Today I'm drawing. I'm finishing page 32.
Right.
I'm going to finish page 32 today, but it's something I was talking about before you got here. It's a bunch of soldiers. It's let's see here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 panel page. 4 of the panels are done.
Nice.
But there's a wide shot that's 4 guys and a couple canines, and it's just a black hole of drawing. It's just, there's so much, it's like all these uniforms and all these weapons, and you got the 2 dogs, and you have it's just this whole thing, and that's but I'm gonna finish today for sure. So that'll be good. And then
I had to do some commission work for one of my clients, like one of my long-term clients. I do right now. I'm doing figure work, figure turnarounds, like toy figures.
Yeah,
and for it's a wrestling. It's called Pro Wrestling Loot. So if you're a wrestling fan and you haven't heard of it out there, then you can check that out. So I do the toys for it, and I draw the turnarounds. They make them into figures, and then he uses my art as the box, which is pretty cool.
That reminds me, just real quick, do you happen to have any leftover Scott Lost action figures? Because I would love my very own Scott Lost action figure. If you have one available, we can work out a deal, whatever.
Yeah. Totally.
Okay.
Yeah, I have this is one of the, so I have a bunch.
Look at that.
This is the Chase 1 of 100. That's my pink and
I have to have one. All right. That would be awesome.
Yeah, I have a whole box. That guy, my client, I went to go sign him,
Yeah.
And that was really fun to do, to draw my own figure. And I put the most detail I've ever drawn on any of the figures that I do for him, because one, they're freaking tiny, right? So
Yeah.
they're like, you
Yeah.
know,
So
two and
what
a
is
half,
that? Probably
3 inches.
3 inches or something? Yeah.
Yeah, yeah, ladies. Um, so I put like all this detail into it, and he came back and he's just like, "Holy shit, dude." He goes, there's so much detail in this. They said they can't do it. Like you kind of have to dumb it down for him because it's like
Oh, it's
way too
too okay.
small to work with. Um, so I don't know if you can, yeah, let me see.
It's a
So
little low res, but
yeah, if you look at the face, they're like the mouth itself, they're
yeah.
basically carved into the plastic, are the eyes.
Okay.
So, like, if you have a ton of detail, you can't do that because there's not a lot of space to work with.
I see.
And so he's like, "You kinda gotta simplify it, dude." He goes, "There's way too much detail in there." And so, like, I was like, "Ah, damn." And then, I even had, I think, Nikes on, like Nike wrestling shoes.
Oh, and they
And so
probably
yeah, he wouldn't let me do that either. They're like,
no.
"Yeah, they can't do that." I was like,
Yeah.
"Damn it." So,
Yeah.
it was real fun to do, though. It was like, "Oh, cool." And I told him, I was like, "If you make"
He's having a lot of fun talking about
uh, he goes, "If you make," I told him, I'm like, "If you make a wrestling figure of me," because I just put it out there, and because he started doing local guys, and I was just like, "Hey, man, if you ever want to do a figure of me, I'll draw it for free." I was like, "You don't even have to pay me for it." And then he
yeah.
goes, "Seriously?" And I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "Done. Yeah, if you want to draw your figure, do it." And I was just like, so I was just like, "Well, you don't even gotta pay me." It's like, I would, that was the one thing, like, a lot of my friends, are on TV right now, a lot of my contemporaries, and, we were at the same level when I retired, and a lot of them are on TV, and, like, it bummed me out for a while, but I realized, I was like, "I don't have a passion for wrestling anymore, so it's not my
Yeah.
path." It doesn't matter, like, and I would have people, like, even to this day, that go, "You should come back, you should come back," and I'm like, "No, I don't want to." Like, I don't have a drive for it anymore. I like waking up on Monday morning without a footprint on my face, you know? So, it's
Yeah.
just my mindset's different. I'm just not in that world anymore. Plus I'm 42. It's just like, God, my
Well,
body's breaking down enough as it is. I don't need any more help.
right? Yeah, just through life, it's
Yeah.
already you feel the creaking and the groaning. Well, what is that was I was curious about that. What is basically the typical age range of a professional wrestler? Like where is it about where it's like what is old for a professional wrestler?
That is an interesting question. I mean, like, Ric Flair was, up until this year, was still wrestling. So I don't know what
Right?
old is. But Diamond Dallas Page, who's very famous back in the 2000s, he started at 40. So
Ooh,
yeah, man, it's kind of crazy. And so he started at 40, and my contemporaries, they're the same age as me as well. So they're in their 40s also, and they're still working, and they're still considered like young guys. Like, in certain areas, like some of them, like my buddy Sky, Scorpio Sky, he's on AEW. I think he's 40. I think he might be 39 or 40. So, and he's been doing it, like, he he started a year after I did, and he's still doing it. And I stopped in 2010. So
mhm.
he's been doing this for quite some time. So at least 20 years he's been working. So I can imagine guys like that, and like guys that I watched as a kid, they were still working up to when I stopped. So I was like, I don't know how your body's going to handle just life after this. It's like, I'm still
Right.
paying for what I did for 10 years. Like, my right knee is shot, my left ankle is shot. I've had, I don't know how many concussions. Like, my vocabulary was a lot bigger before I was wrestling, that's for sure.
Really?
Um, yeah, man, it's kind of brutal in that sense. Like, and I don't know if it's just age, getting older as well, because, like, I'll
That's
listen to other podcasts with older creators, and I can hear them searching for words, and I'm like, they're doing the same thing that I do, but the difference is they're
right.
like 10 to 15 years older than I am.
And they
So
were
it's just,
wrestling. Yeah, right.
exactly, exactly.
Well, that's the thing. I mean, I've noticed we're not going to turn this into the steady and gradual humiliation of getting older video, but I
We don't need
have
any of that. We don't need any help. That's already.
You don't need any help, no.
It's just
But
there.
I have no. This is something I sometimes maybe it's just a story I like to tell myself, or maybe it's true. Anytime I find myself searching for a word or achy after I did something one day and the next day I'm sore, like because I am now 47, going to turn 48 in a few months. My head always goes to like, I'm getting old. But sometimes I think, I'm sure I searched for a word when I was 30. I'm sure I was sore the next day when I was 30, but I never blamed that. So I don't know. It's hard for me to say like what is really me being older and what is just, me thinking of myself as getting older and now looking for evidence. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. Yeah, that's a good question. I just feel like when I couldn't find words before, I think it was a faster response when I could find it.
Yeah, it comes
Now
quicker.
like I feel like I'm searching way longer, and it's very frustrating. So
I know.
I don't know, maybe some brain teasers or something.
And that is new, and I don't know if that's an age thing or what, but like the frustration when you can't, or when like, hey, who is that actor in that movie? I used to always be like immediately, oh, that was whoever,
See, those
and
I can take some time with, and it doesn't frustrate me as much because I remember doing that when I was younger. I'm like, "Fuck, who was that?" And
yeah,
then we would be like, "Don't look it up, don't look it up." It was a game, like we
yes,
all played it.
oh,
So
look, it'll come.
yeah, that one I don't mind, but
Yeah,
it's the when I'm explaining stuff on the podcast, for instance, like there'll be pauses and I'm searching for the word and I'll come up with a alternative. It's not as good as the word I was looking for. So
yeah,
that's the shit that gets frustrating. And
yeah.
again, I don't think it's simply because we're getting older that we're getting frustrated with it. I think it's taking us longer than we used to, and that's the frustration.
Yeah, no, I
It's
think
just like, oh, that would take me 5 or 6 seconds to remember. Now it's taking 30 seconds. And 30 seconds is a long fucking time to be
sometimes
thinking.
take it 30 minutes. Sometimes it'll be like, who's that actress? And I'll be like, it'll come to me. And 30 minutes later, it's like Jennifer Aniston, like whatever,
Yeah,
or whoever.
just a super basic one. Jennifer,
Yeah,
it was
that would be. I would be concerned if I was forgetting who was, the girl in Friends with the hair. Like if I was searching for that, I think that's time for a dementia check. But there are lots of others where, or books I've read, or authors, or bands, or whatever. It's like,
Ed has a good comment in there. He goes, Bronson is the writer. They have a team that assists with artwork. So that's funny.
There we go. Yes. So
I feel like we're ignoring the chat. Is there anything that we need to say about the chat?
We are ignoring the chat a little bit. Let's see here. As long as your drawing hand works. Let's see here. If you aren't as popular, you leave wrestling earlier. I don't. Yeah, I guess the people who hang in there, but Peter is older than everyone here, supposedly. Drawing and listening.
How old are you, Peter?
Yeah, Peter.
Yeah, come clean, buddy.
I'm clean. Paul, great show.
It's
a great guest.
I don't know if I got some Peter. I believe he follows me on Instagram. I believe I follow him as well. Thanks for your mentions on, your channel. And I don't know what came first, the chicken or the egg, but like a lot of the people that you've had on your show follow me on Instagram. So
great, good.
Yeah,
good. They should. I think I mentioned a couple episodes ago. Like I feel like I have two distinct little indie comic communities, and one is sort of my making comics peeps, you and Keith, and then the other is sort of the Artcasters crowd, like Josh and Scott and Corey and all that. And there's Jim Lujan, my sort of animator friend. Like I feel like we got to merge the streams here. I feel like there's a lot of commonality here. I think we'd all sort of appreciate each other.
I saw that episode recently. I've been going back, as you know, because I told you about it. Yeah,
I'll get a comment on like the fourth one I did like 3 months ago.
Yeah,
I'll suddenly get an alert in YouTube and look, and it's you commenting on it because I can tell you're watching it just now.
But, right? Yeah, like I watched the first episode, and then just things got really busy, and I was like, I need to watch these, and especially going to be able, or being on the episode, like in, at that time in the future, I was just like, I really should watch the product and not just be on. Like we'll have people on our podcast, and it's okay that they don't listen. It's not that big of a deal, but it's always cooler when they do.
Of
Um,
course. Yeah.
so yeah, and I was just like, oh, let me check it out. So I saw the one where you had pretty much everyone on, like, yeah, it was interesting. It was interesting conversation. You do get some of that crosstalk where two people are trying to talk at once and like they haven't figured it out yet. Like
Yeah.
one of them should stop. But that's always
Right.
kind of funny too, though. Like when you watch it, they're like, they don't know. So
They don't know. Well, yeah, and it is. I mean, and obviously, like I'm very impressed by what you guys do at Making Comics. Not only that you get those out. Have you guys ever missed a week? Like it
no,
doesn't seem like it. No,
no.
it's
Up
crazy. And
until
these are very solid podcasts of a good length. Keith is doing some editing, like, I mean, they're kind of cleaned up. You're getting rid of stuff that you didn't think worked, and you're censoring stuff. Like, I mean, these are produced. It isn't just like hit record, stop, upload it, and just like no fuss. It's like and you guys are both busy guys. Like you have a lot going on and you still manage to do it. That's it's pretty impressive.
Oh, thank you. Yeah, Keith, for one, Keith is super fast, like when it comes to editing stuff. And two, we try to not have a lot of stuff we need to edit out, or crazy shit we say that needs to be edited over, which happens. But yeah, we try to keep it pretty clean. There are episodes where he doesn't really need to do much of anything. And he goes, no, like everything, I just got to balance the levels and, but like there's been a couple where it's just like, dude, you got to edit that out. I shouldn't have said that, or like, it's like, oh, hey, but then sometimes I'm like, leave that in. That's funny. He goes, no, I'm not leaving that in. So there's like some shit like that where it's just like, I think the line is fine, but he doesn't think the line is fine. So like, we won't touch it. And it's kind of like, Jordan's old Republicans buy sneakers too thing. So it's like we don't try to talk about anything too controversial because number one, what's the point? Who gives a shit? And then like number two, it's just like, yeah, we don't want to alienate anyone and we don't want anyone to make them feel a certain way. It's like that's not what we're here for. We're here to number one, give you guys information. Over the years we've collected information when it comes to writing and drawing. And we want to share that with people. And two, it's just like, yeah, it's not necessary. It's not necessary to do anything like risque or whatever. And then also we want the support of the comics, all of the comics crowd. It's just like, look, we want everyone to pick up our books and like we want everyone to listen to the podcast and make it feel like it's a safe place, regardless of what side of the street you're on. It doesn't really matter. It's just like, well, that's not what we're here for. We're here to create comic books and give information, and hopefully the people listening to the pod enjoy it and take the information that we're giving and run with it. And like I've had some artists like contact me and go, hey, do you mind if I share the Slack method? And I was like, I don't mind at all. 100% share the Slack method.
Rundown for the audience here, for people who have not listened to Making Comics, but I know you're all going to go subscribe to it now. Run down the Slack method for everybody.
I don't know if you're able to share this too. I sent you a couple of images on Instagram Messenger, or I'm sorry, Facebook Messenger, because I don't have the capability to share my screen. So if you want to share, I do. Oh, that must be a StreamYard thing. But I sent you a couple of images.
It'll probably I'll have to okay it. It'll give me a pop-up, but you should be able to. Go ahead.
Okay. Yeah, the stuff I have is on the StreamYard's on my computer and my iPad has the images. So if anything, like it might be easier.
Okay, well maybe if you can't get it to work here, I'll get the images you share.
Okay. Unless I'm just being lazy, and if you can't figure it out, I'll send it to my computer. I'm just a lazy bastard sometimes.
No.
It's like, hey Gary, thanks for having me on. You deal with this shit.
You do it here.
This was your fault. You should have never brought me on.
That's right. No, never again. Never. No, this is okay. Which would you like me to share first?
The thumbnails.
But of the two thumbnails. Oh, I'm sorry. I don't know. I'm sorry. I now I'm understanding what you mean. Okay.
Oh yeah, it's one image.
Now let's see if this will work. Hold on here.
So the Slack method is the method that I use digitally. It's harder to do if you're working physically, but it's something you can do. It's just slightly more difficult. So I lay my thumbnails out digitally, and Gary's going to share the sheet. So this is actually to Second Shift 13. This is the book I'm working on. I work on different layers. So I'll lay the whole issue out like this. This is pages 8 through 15. And I'll go through, I'll read Ed's script. Ebron's in there in the chat. I'll read a script. I'll interpret that visually. Ed does a great job at breaking down the pages and the action as to what's going on, but sometimes I'll interpret that my own way. And so right here, you can see the progression of the story. It might be hard to understand what's going on, which I'm okay with because this is an issue I'm working on. I don't want to give too much stuff away, but a lot of it's uh, like character work essentially. Like, so this character that's being introduced into the story is a new character for this arc, but she has been around in a couple of the characters' lives for quite some time. So, yeah, so that's what the conversation is going on in here. And then you can show, so in the bottom, those two bottom pages that are X'd out, those are the pages I finished. So it's on a separate layer. And once I'm done, just so I can keep track to do a fast count as to how many pages I have left in my story, I'll X them out and I'll go, okay, I have 6 pages left to do. And so that helps me mentally go, okay, you only have 6 pages to do. Let's hurry it up, and that's just my own personal way I like to do things. So the Slack method, how that works is these thumbnails, since I'm working digitally, I can actually zoom in really tight. So those are very small. So this sheet itself is 11 by 17 or 17 by 11. It's turned sideways. And those pages, they are in the correct dimensions of 11 by 17 comic book paper. So I'll lay them out as they need to be on the page. And so I can actually zoom in really tight and just work on figure work on that page if I'd like to. And that's how come certain stuff, like the pages that are crossed out, you can see that they're slightly tighter than some of the other pages. Some pages are tighter than the others. Some are pretty vague because I'm still trying to figure out the process of what's going on in those panels. But more or less, you can see, like if you zoomed in, you can tell roughly what's going on. At least I know for sure what's going on. So I won't be confused. So I can go in and I can detail those. And when I get to a certain point, like for instance, that double page spread that's crossed out, I felt like that was enough. I didn't need to go in anymore to work any more figure work out. I thought I worked enough of it out on the thumbnail where I would copy and paste that into a double page spread. I would blow it up to be the exact size and I would work on it there. And so these thumbnails act basically as the skeleton of those pages. So that's the Slack method. So, well, that's part of the Slack method. I'm sorry. I'm jumping ahead here. The Slack method itself is the ability to work on multiple pages at once. So my philosophy on comic books is you can work on a page. So if you look at the first couple of pages there is some background work to be done. And for me, those just take longer. Like I love drawing characters. So I wish I was a mangaka where I could just hire someone to draw the backgrounds because that would be great. But I don't. So those take me longer to do. Certain days are different than others. So some days I'm in a really good flow and things are just moving. I can work on a background, no problem. There's no issues there. I'm just banging stuff out. So on days like that, that's when I would continue to do as many backgrounds as possible. Because for me, it's not as easy as character work is. Character work is just so damn easy that I would rather jump to that. But on those days when I'm really feeling the backgrounds, I make sure to hop around as much as possible and knock that stuff out because it just takes so much longer. So for me, it's better to keep the train moving, constantly move as opposed to slowing down because what's happening those days is you're eating into your own time. So if you're working on indie comics, let's say you have a day job or you have kids or you have so many responsibilities that you have only a certain amount of time to work on these pages. You need to maximize that time all the time. So the way I do it is continually work on the thing that I want to work on that day. If I don't feel like working on backgrounds that day, I don't work on backgrounds. I'll hop to characters. I'll hop to different pages that have more interesting poses, compositions. Maybe more of the work is already done. Maybe I already did most of the work on that page. And I'm like, today's a rough day. I need something easy, something I don't need to think about. I don't want to think about how to have these two characters interact if they're fighting or something like that. I don't want to use that brain power today. I just don't have it in me. It's been a long day. I'll hop to a page that's more or less just needs to be cleaned up. So, if you're constantly doing that, you're constantly moving at the maximum amount of speed that it would take you to draw some things. There is no slowdown. If you're always working on the thing that you want to work on, time is extended for you. So even though you only have 20 to 30 minutes today to work on something, you're working on it very, very fast. 20 to 30 minutes of working on something you don't feel like working on, you're not going to produce as much work. If it's something you want to do, it's going to be way quicker. So for me, that's the Slack method, the ability to jump around to every single page, any page that you want to work on that day to maximize your time.
That's great. That's great. Now, so I've always been a little fascinated by your approach doing this. Obviously, it works for you. I feel like I do it within the page I'm on. So, for example, like I won't skip around through different pages, which is fascinating to me. Like really, really interesting to me, and I kind of it's something that I think I would like to try playing with in a future book. Like this one, I'm already very much committed to the process I've been doing.
Yeah.
But I like this idea of like just once I think I would like to try this. It's like I'm not feeling this today, so I'm going to do backgrounds on the next page or 3 pages from now or whatever. I do it within whatever page I'm on. And my mentality, and this is kind of what I'm hearing when you're describing it, is all like I almost think of it in a sort of a silly analytical way. All these lines eventually have to get drawn. As long as I'm drawing lines, it's forward momentum. It doesn't matter where they are. Doesn't like everything needs to get drawn here. So like I'm just going to draw whatever I'm feeling like drawing on this page right now, right this second, because it's all getting me closer to that no more lines left. you know, the goal for that page.
I can't remember if we've talked about this on the Making Comics podcast or it's something you and I just spoken about either in person or in our group chat. You couldn't imagine from that conversation hopping around. Like for you, it was just like, no, I start on page 1 and I go in that order, and that's the way you do it. And like for me, it's interesting. I think most people do it that way, to be honest with you. And it obviously works for you. You're producing
but there are downsides, you know, and that's what's interesting about this to me is I think it would remove a downside to my process. The downside to my process, especially if you're doing a long book, like 40 or 60 pages, like the previous two.
Drawing your character with the plaid jacket for.
Plaid. So that's another thing. I want to circle back to that. But if you're doing a page a week, let's talk about D vs. M 1997. 59 pages, 59 weeks of drawing. Okay. By the time I'm drawing, you know, my 58th or 59th page, I've been at it for more than a year. And what's coming out is going to be a little different than what I was drawing on week 2 or 3. Because there's just, first of all, there's drift, which I've talked about in past videos, where, I mean, look at early Garfield versus modern Garfield. Like you just start drawing things a little bit differently. Right. Hopefully, it's getting more dialed in and better, but no matter what, it's changing. You know, it's whether better or worse. It's just if I draw Young Man in Black from 75 today and compare him to how I drew him 4 years ago or something, it's going to be different. So when you're drawing over that length of time, working on a comic for a year or something, there's definitely going to be some drift, and something I have to add into the end of my process is going back to my early pages and sort of tweaking them to match so it's more consistent all the way through, as that was the necessary side effect of the way I'm doing it. If I'm doing it your way, the Slack method, I feel like that becomes less of an issue, because I may be thinking of it wrong, but it seems like, well, you know, if I'm kind of just hopping around and doing all my backgrounds at once, maybe my backgrounds are more consistent. If I'm hopping around and doing all this character at once, or or, you know, only doing things when I'm really feeling it, feeling like, okay, like now this is the day, I'm ready to draw that plaid jacket. Like maybe that will be a more consistent result than the days I'm making myself sit down and draw a plaid jacket
Yeah.
and I'm not feeling it, but I'm
And
making
it's the
myself.
speed as well. Like, just having you talk about it, I think it, makes sense. I think it makes more sense too when you talk about it like for yourself and like
Yeah,
how you could apply it to your own work. So just like you said, like the days where you do just feel like banging out the jack, it's like, you know what, I'm in the right headspace to do that. It's beneficial to you because it cuts down the dragging of
yeah,
how long it takes you to finish a page. Like I remember listening to a couple of episodes where you're talking about, yeah, I finished past midnight. Like when I
yeah,
when I finally finished this page, it was way past midnight. That might have been a day where you were dragging yourself across the finish line because you didn't feel like necessarily working on that page. And
right.
that's what creates the slowdown and creates those longer shifts than you're used to.
We're
So
getting a lot of rave reviews for the Slack method. Paul is like wants to try this. Scott Cirkland wants to try this. There's yeah, so it's
yeah, and it's
but
a
so now here's my question. And now
yeah.
obviously this isn't a problem for you. I would worry about it for me. To me, it's like let's say let's say this weekend cleaning the house. And I'm gonna use the Slack method for cleaning the house.
Mhm.
I don't want to do the bathroom. I'm not in the mood for doing the bathroom, so I'm gonna do the kitchen. And then tomorrow it's like, nah, no bathroom. I'm gonna vacuum. Like, and
Yeah.
eventually what happens is like that bathroom is a fucking nightmare because like I'm never in the mood to do it. And so like you apparently though don't end up at the end of your process with this pile of nightmare. I think Keith loves to use this example of like the snakes in the Pee-wee movie where like
Yes.
he's rescuing all these animals from the pet shop that's on fire and he keeps on avoiding the snakes,
Yeah.
and
Just keeps
finally
running
like
past them.
yes. So do you end up with a pile of snakes or do you trust, you know what? One of these days I'm going to be in the mood to do snakes and like it'll be fine. It's all going to work
Mhm.
out.
Yeah, I trust that there will be a day that I want to save the snakes.
Okay.
So,
Okay.
or this, and I don't know how you creators, Gary, or and everyone else listening is, when you are at the home stretch of an issue, you're motivated to finish that issue.
Yeah.
So, regardless of all that's left is snakes at the end, you're so in the mood to knock this out that it
Yeah.
puts you in the mood to draw,
Yeah.
those backgrounds or save those
I would
snakes.
say, God, that's so true. The two best, most favorite times to draw for me are the first 3 pages and the last 3 pages. You know what I mean? Because first three, you're shot out of a cannon. It's like, yes, starting the new project. And like those go down so fast and so easy because you're like, here we go.
Yeah,
This is awesome. And then the last three, where you're seeing like, I'm almost done. I'm
yeah,
almost done. And no matter what's on those last 3 pages, like they just come out. They just come
yeah.
out because you're like,
Um,
the
pop
end's in
up
sight.
that pop up that double page spread for me if you could.
Okay. Yeah.
And this is a sneak preview. This is actually so Ed E Bronson in the chat there. This is something he's talked to me about for quite some time, and this is the double page spread that was completed. And so when I started this issue, the issue started off with the introduction of this character, the character on the left side. So she was someone I haven't drawn like a lot of. I've drawn her twice, and it
Mhm.
was she's because she's a newer character, and it was just like okay, I have an idea of what she looks like, but the more I draw her, the more consistent she is. So that's one of the things in the beginning of the issue. It was the introduction of her, but it was a shit ton of backgrounds, and I
Yeah.
wasn't feeling it. It was just at that time I had came back from Seattle. And then I had went on a guy's trip for 3 days, just getting wasted for 3 days. Ed was there. And so it was one of those things when I started working on the book again, I was like, I'm tired, I'm exhausted, I don't want to do anything. And all I have to do on these pages are just a whole bunch of backgrounds at weird angles that I don't want to do. And
Right.
so was stuck on those first 3 pages for a few days, like maybe even a week. And then I went, you know what? What am I doing? How come I'm not using the Slack method? So I went through and I found this double page spread. And I was like, I did most of the work on this already. It's really fun to do. It's mostly character work. And I think I can move really quickly doing that. And then what that did was it put me back in the groove. It put me back in the right headspace. Working on those backgrounds, that's not my thing. That's not something I'm super interested in doing. It's something that has to be done to establish shots and locations and whatnot. You have to do it regardless of you like it or not. But at the moment, it was not the right time and place for it. So I started to do this double page spread. And this is something Ed has been talking about. He showed me some examples of some like a circular pattern that he wanted to do. Now, the circular patterns that he showed me look nothing like this. There's a
Yeah.
circle motif in it, but the way it reads, just by looking at it, you can tell it reads just like a standard page. You start in the top left, you move to the right, you move down left, move to the right. So you really get a feel for the story. It works as a standard way to read panels. And then even with the color, that's going to punch it home even more. Like and so when I came up with this, I was really happy. It's just like, okay, I took something that existed before, something that Ed showed me that he's seen in other comics that he really liked. And I was like, how can I do this in a way that it works for me and it's not someone wouldn't see this and go, "Hey, I remember seeing something like this in Batman," or "I remember seeing something like this in Grendel," because it's not the same thing. And
Mhm.
using the Slack method to get to this page helped me mentally to start working on those little background images. Like you can't tell, I think it's in one, two, three, four. It's the fourth panel. Um, there's a background there. There's like a cityscape behind her.
Mhm.
And it's just like a few days ago, I wouldn't even want to even attempt that. As simple as that background is, I wouldn't even wanted to have done that. So
Yeah.
it got me in the right headspace to put me where I needed to be. And then from there, I was just like, I'm having so much fun with this fight sequence that I want to do it again. I want to do the next page and I want to do the next page after that. So I was
Yeah.
able to complete this fight scene and in a record time, really, like for the amount of work that's on there. Like this page I believe is 23 panels. It took me 22 hours to do. So and that's like start to finish, like laying like
Wow.
laying it out and everything. And then the next page was like cuckoo bananas. I had 14 panels on it. So like but combined with the Slack method, I also do a panel a day. That's my thing. So if I can do one panel a day, I will have at the end of the year, conservatively, 65 pages of comic books. So if you're out
Wow.
there, if you're a creator out there, if you can commit to doing one panel a day at the end of your year, if you draw every day, like if you're nuts like me and Gary are, and you just draw every single day, at the end of the
Right.
year, you'll have 65 pages. So, but what these pages did, this double page spread and the page after, it threw that all out of whack because this has 23 panels and the next page has 14 panels, and usually the standard comic page for me is anywhere between 4 to 7 panels at most. So like these are going double and triple over what I normally do per page. So like if I chose to do my other standard pages, I think I would have, instead of having 4 pages done, I would probably have 6 or 7 pages done. So it kind of throws the number off a little bit when you increase your panels per page. But that's why that's a, it's more or less 65 pages a year.
Which is a very respectable rate. I mean,
Right.
that's
Yeah, that's
I
V
think
versus them every year. New issue every year.
it would be a new issue every year. Yeah, at least. Yeah, at least.
But that would be only
I
if
just
you were
I
just
love
doing the
how
art.
what's that?
That would only be if you were just doing the art as opposed to the writing.
That's
So
right. Not having to write
thankfully I
it,
have
not
Ed
having to
on
do
the
all
writing.
the research and the prep and everything. But yeah, just drawing. Yeah, but still, you know, I do love this layout, and I love how first of all it's I mean it's so unconventional, but also it's and this is a testament to you pulling it off. It's not confusing to follow. Which to
Thank you.
me, that would be my fear. If someone came to me and said, I'm thinking a circular 2 page layout, with like
Yeah.
real unconventional panel shapes, I'd be like, that's gonna be a mess. I have no idea how to draw that. I don't like nah, no, 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 no. Like I would totally veto that. And and you didn't fall into any of the concerns that I would have where it's like I don't know where to look, I don't know how to follow it, it's not going to make any sense. Like this flows, and this is even before you've put any dialogue in. So that's
Mm.
pretty cool. Pretty
Oh,
cool.
thanks, man. Yeah, I'm really
Um,
happy with how it came out, and I'm glad it got me out of that funk. So, yeah.
yeah. So Scott had a question. Other Scott.
Okay.
Scott Circlin said, "How big is this file if you have all the pages laid out in a single file? Presumably your thumbnail file."
My thumbnail file. I mean, it's 300 DPI. It's like a standard comic book page, like how I lay it out. If Scott, do you work? What do you work on? Are you working on Procreate, or do you work in Photoshop? I can send this to Gary. I can send my thumbnail image, my blank thumbnail sheet. I
I
can
can
send
just
it to
forward
him.
it
He can
along.
send it to you.
There you
I
go.
have it in a Photoshop file. I work on Procreate on the iPad, and yeah, it's standard. Let me see.
Cool.
Yeah, just 300 DPI, 5100 pixel by 3300 pixel height weight. Yeah, yeah, 17 by 11.
That's pretty big. Like it's a
Yeah.
fairly, yeah. Peter had a brilliant solution to my saying the best 3 pages or the best drawing is the first 3 pages and the last 3 pages. He said, just make 6-page comics. There we go.
There you go.
That's
Best
there
comic
we
around.
go. That's it. Brilliant. Brilliant.
That's it. That's it.
I'm gonna
Yeah,
leave it.
yeah. So even with your, what'd you call it, the drift. So like when
Yeah.
you start drawing a character, and at the beginning of your story it looks one way, by the end it's
Yeah.
definitely a completely other way, or slightly other way. The benefit of, you work digitally as well, right? So
Yeah.
the benefit is we can go back and fix that. It's not a problem.
Yeah.
So the excuse me, the double page spread that I just showed you guys, I'm still debating on how I'm drawing that female character's nose.
Yeah.
Like, so her origin, uh she's like half, okay. Like I'm like trying to figure if this is a spoiler or not, but I guess it's not really. Um but anyway, she's a half and half, two different types of Asian, different
Mhm.
types of Asians that don't get along. So I'm like, okay, well, let's, like, okay, what would her nose look like coming from those two worlds? So that's like, for me, for that character, that's the drift. The drift on her is her eyes
Yeah.
are the same, her hair is the same, her body type is the same. It's her nose that might be different. And
Yeah.
so that's something I like to think about when I'm drawing characters. It's like, what do their noses look like? Because a lot of artists suffer from this thing. It's a same face syndrome. So
Yeah.
if you ask an artist to draw a face, like if they're a man and you ask them to draw a man's face, a lot of the features are going to be very similar to their own features, regardless of you know it or not. If you ask
Yeah.
someone to draw a nose, they're going to draw their nose. So I try to stay away from that as much as possible. I feel like my four main characters all have different noses, except for the brother and sister team. They have the same nose, like it's intentional. And so it's just, you know, I want to make sure I diversify their faces enough, and the nose is the center of your face. So it's just like, it's the thing that everyone looks at. So it's
Right.
just like the eye shape and the nose shape. Those are the two biggest things for me. So for her, it's just like, okay, I really need to decide if that's what I want or if I can adjust it a little more. So with that drift, even though this is page 8, the drift is happening in the middle of the issue as opposed to yours where it would happen at the beginning of the issue to the end, right? So
Right.
my
Right.
drift's in the middle. But
Right.
the beauty of this is you just have to acknowledge the drift exists, and you have
Yeah.
to decide if the drift is close enough to the end result that you're okay with it. And if it's not, then you simply adjust it. It's just like, at the end of the day, this is your book, this is your property you're putting out into the world. So you want to make sure what you're giving to the world is exactly what you want it to be. So if you're
Yeah.
okay with a little bit of drift, then that's what it is, and it's not a big
Right.
deal. But if you're not, go back and fix it. Take that extra time. It's going to take 30 minutes or less. I think that, that double page spread will take me less than 30 minutes to adjust whatever tweaks to her nose that I end up doing.
Yeah. The revision process is usually it's a breeze. It's actually a nice break after the hamster wheel of drawing for however long I've been drawing.
Yeah.
Usually my process is when I finish this, I will print it all up and set it aside for a week or two and just try to not think about it, not look at it. Like I need a little bit of distance.
Yeah.
And then I'll come back with post-it notes and go through from page 1 and start making a list of things I need to look at. And
Okay.
like there's some already for this one where I know I think I talked about this on a previous video. The main character has a wristwatch. It's important that she has a wristwatch because like midway through the book, she checks the time. So I know she has a wristwatch there. And there are a lot of parts where I drew her and her arms are up and you, in theory, should be able to see this watch and I didn't draw it. So
Yeah.
I already have a note. The comic's not even done yet. And I have a post-it note in my binder that says, look for the wristwatch, you know?
Nice.
And so just to see where do I need to go back and add a wristwatch? There's all sorts of things like, oh, you know, I didn't, like in 97, it'd be like, I didn't like how Jenny's hair looked in that one panel. Or I made it too long, her hair too long there, or too short there. Or where's the shine on the handcuffs in that scene, or whatever. You know, like there's this little, like just little things that take me out of it.
That's the little things are the best things. Like that's something that a lot of people don't realize. When I was wrestling, that was like talking to other wrestlers. They're like, I like that you do these little things. And I was like, what do you mean? And
Yeah.
and they were like, after you punch, you always kind of do this. Like you like if you punch someone in the, but I do like real fast, you know, it's just
Yeah.
like it's just like one quick one, because if you punch
Yeah.
someone in the face, it's gonna hurt a little bit. So it's just
Right.
like I would do these little small details. And those, you know, people that are really into wrestling, that's what they would see. They would see the small details, like the devil's in the details, right? So
Yeah.
with comics, it's the exact same. With the double page spread and the 2 pages that followed, that new character, she has earrings and she has a beauty mole near her eye. And so I went through all the panels. I'm all, nope, whoop,
Nope.
whoop,
Missing.
whoop,
Yeah.
yep,
Right.
yep. And
Right.
like 5 of the panels, she didn't have the mole. And so I had to adjust those things. In like 4 of the panels, she didn't have the earrings. So it's just like it's totally those things to keep everything consistent and concise that makes your product that much better.
Right. And I think especially with the audience, I think we in particular have developed. Because I think not every artist worries about that stuff and not every artist audience cares about that stuff. But I think maybe especially you and I and like the approach we take to the drawing,
Yeah.
at least I you'll have to tell me like what kind of feedback you've gotten, but I often get the feedback like I love all the little details. So it's like, well, I know that that's part of what they're looking for. Part of what they're looking for is like, that's exactly right, phone from the 70s. Or, oh, you know, like everyone brings up in 97, Jenny's Fiero has one headlamp that's stuck up, you know, like because that was
Oh,
a
that's cool.
common failing. Like the
Yeah,
Fieros
yeah.
have these headlamps that go like this,
Yes.
and it would regularly break. And she, you know, she doesn't have a lot of money. She's a waitress or something. So like she's got one that's stuck up and she just leaves it, you know.
Yes. One
So many people
unique.
like the little headlamp on the Fiero. That's such a Fiero thing. Like, you know,
Yeah.
they love those little details. So then that encourages me to go and make sure I'm getting them. But all that, I'll come up with a laundry list of like little tweaks I need to make, little fixes. And I can bust them out in a day or two for like an
Yeah.
entire book. Like it doesn't take long to like make all that right. Like all,
Yeah.
even though
You
it
really
takes
need to.
dozens of,
Yeah,
go ahead.
I was just gonna say, yeah, you really need to do that. Like that's something that's really important to keep your book consistent. And it's
Yeah.
just so easy to forget about them or just miss one or two when you're um when you're working, because you get
Yeah.
so engulfed in the thing that you're working on at that moment. So sometimes those little things,
Yeah.
slip by. So it's great that you're taking the time when you're done with your issue to go back and look through to make sure all your T's are crossed and your I's are dotted.
Because you're usually focused on whatever the slaying whatever the dragon is on that page, like the challenging thing to draw. Like for I just did it a couple pages ago. One of the female character, she cries, and so from that point on in the story, she's got this mascara smear where she went like this, and there's a mascara smear. And like I was like, okay, I got to remember to keep drawing the mascara smear. And I forgot there was one page I totally forgot. Just like
Oh yeah.
because I was so preoccupied with all this other stuff that was going on. It was like this is the one thing, but that's the kind of thing that someone someday, I guarantee it, is going to say, I love that this character cries on page X, and 15 pages later, she still has the smear. You know,
Yeah.
like even though like that's long past, because it's like it's not just going to magically go away like a movie. It's going to be there.
Right.
Like I
Yeah,
know
I
I need to.
remember doing that with, one of my characters. She had got attacked by birds, and so her face was all scratched up, and
Yeah,
then I remember, drawing a few pages later, and I just kept going, and I was like, "Oh, fuck, I didn't draw her with the scratches on her face like I
yeah,
did on that first page after she comes out of the flock." And
Right.
then so I had to go back and I had to like put them in. It's just one of like the details are the best. You got to make sure
Yeah.
you're getting all those in. I actually have a hard out.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. We've
One.
done 2 hours. 2 hours just went like that. I didn't realize it had been that long.
Yeah, it's flying, man. Like honestly, I feel like we have more to talk about, so I
Tons.
can always
Well,
come
you're
back
always welcome back.
next month or
It doesn't
something.
have to be a scheduled thing. Like just anytime you're interested, like I can shoot you a link and just if you want to
Okay.
pop in, just pop in.
Yeah,
But
sounds good.
I
It was
really
a lot of fun.
appreciate you coming by and people were excited to hear from you. And I can tell a few artists are very psyched about the potential of the Slack method in their
Yeah.
process.
And the Slack
Is there
method
anything you want to pitch?
Oh yeah, so the Slack method, it's SLAC. It's a little egotistical, I guess, but it's the Scott Lost Advanced Comic Cartooning Method. So that's why it's the Slack method. Making Comics podcast. So if you liked what you heard today, if you like how I talk about comics, go to Making Comics podcast, it's just called Making Comics on Instagram or not. See, I'm doing all of my plugs messed up right now. You got me
It's
flustered, Gary.
it's because the tables are turned. Usually
It
I'm in
is,
your house, and
and I don't
now
have
you're in
time
my
to
house.
edit this out. Like this is live. So you go here. Let
No,
me just do stuff in order. So then
yeah,
my stupid brain fixes it. 98 episodes of Making Comics is like, no, you have to say it in this order, and if you don't say it in this order, you're going to screw it all up.
it doesn't mean anything. It's just words, right?
Yeah, just words. So you can find me on social media at Scott Lost, SCOTTLOST, and then Facebook.com/Scott Lost. And if you like the words that I was saying beyond these last 30 seconds to a minute, you can look up the Making Comics podcast. So iTunes, Stitcher, Spotify, just look up Making Comics, and it's going to be, it looks like a white album cover, and it says Making Comics, and that's us. So me and Keith Foster, that's my partner there. He does a book called Kadoja. And so he talks about the writing side of it. I talk about the art side of it, more or less. And we talk about E. Bronson, Ed, on the pod as well. And also Gary. Gary gets a lot of mentions. So if you're like Squatch and you just love Gary and are a fan of Gary, you can go there and listen to us talk about Gary sometimes. And he's actually been on the pod a couple of times. So
If you need
it's really fun.
If you need even more Gary content, that's a
That's
place.
right.
Yeah.
All Gary all the time. And he flashes us on there, but it's only a podcast, so you can't see it.
You can't
so,
tell.
Yeah.
It's a little inside joke. It's a little thing we do, but no one gets to see. Yeah.
No charges pressed. Only screenshots taken. So that's it, man. You can find if you want to check out the comic books I do, that would be great. accidentalaliens.com. You can find Second Shift. Second Shift is minimum wage during the day, minimum wage workers during the day, superheroes at night. And I do another book called Wanderers of Milisanda. It's anthropomorphic dinosaurs versus humans. 1,000 years in the future, we start colonizing other planets, and we come across the planet Milisanda, where the meteor never hit, and dinosaurs of that world survived and evolved. So it's two dominant species trying to coexist on one planet, and that usually does not work out. So, and that one, so Second Shift is kind of like standard American style comics. I've talked about a lot on this episode, and then like superhero comics. And then Wanderers is more of a manga anime bend mixed in with like American cartooning. And so it's definitely fun. It's different than Second Shift completely. Second Shift is full color superheroing, and Wanderers of Milisanda is manga influenced. It has zipatone screen tones. It's in black and white. So if you dig the black and white vibe Gary's putting out there, this is also black and white. So check those out, accidentalaliens.com.
And both are worth checking out, totally. And we are going to definitely get Keith in here sometime in the next couple of weeks. I got to pick a weekend for him, but and then you'll be able to get that half of Making Comics, and that should be fun too. So
right on. Awesome,
all right, man.
This was so much fun.
This was fun. Yeah, I'm glad you finally got here. I'm glad I finally got my act together and picked a day for you.
It'd be cool to pop in like on an episode where you have some of the other guys in, so I can talk to them, see if they've actually implemented the Slack method and if it worked out for them, or if they're like, no, this is shit.
Well, I think what should happen, I don't want to put them on the spot, but I know they all watch this at their different times, if not watching live. I think you got to have this character on Artcasters to talk about the Slack method. I think it's an interesting approach, and I think it especially help a lot of people. I think for some people, it might open up a gate. Like they're a
Yeah.
little blocked, they're having trouble like getting started, they're not getting productive. It's like if you can spread the work a little more organically like that, maybe then something will shake loose and you'll be able to start delivering. So
Yeah, absolutely. And then you more than likely won't be left with snakes at the end of all of this. You would I
yes.
I think it would work out to where like because there are times where I'm just like, yeah, backgrounds today. Let's knock the backgrounds out. And then so I'll go in and I'll just bang out as many as I can. And then
Yeah.
before I know it, it's just like, yeah, I have maybe one background left at the end, and then the rest is cover work. Yeah, I'm cool with that. So easy
Be
peasy.
ready to switch. No, I,
Absolutely.
I can see that, and I could see especially if you, because eventually you'll tire of even the thing you're in the mood to do.
Yep.
So you might be like, I'm in a background mood today, or
Hmm.
like I'm in a background mood, period. So you'll do it and do it and do it. Eventually you exhaust that mood and you're like, okay, now I'm dying to do character work, and
Yeah,
so like
exactly.
you'll do that. Yeah. So yeah, makes
Right on.
sense. Cool.
All right, my dude.
Oh, look at that. All right, good. I think I fully support this decision. Definitely gets down Keith on our casters. There we go.
Oh,
That's
thank you.
that's
Thank you so much. I'd love to be
my
on.
my work here is complete. Okay. So
Right on.
have a good rest of the day. Have fun. You said you're going to a party?
Yeah, yeah, I got a family thing. I gotta help a neighbor move a couch, and then I'll
Oh,
maybe
that's
draw
fun.
a panel, and then I gotta get ready for a party. So, hey, such
Okay.
as indie life. Fit it in
Such
where you
as
could
indie
get it.
life. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm gonna be just drawing and there's a lawn that need to be mowed, but that's it. That's it. So all
Right
right.
on. Cool, man. All right, I'll talk to you soon.
Well, yes. Talk to you later. Scott Lost, ladies and gentlemen. Great guy, right? So, just for a little bit of background, and then I'm going to log off to get busy. We first met at Phoenix Fan Fusion pre-pandemic. I don't remember what year that would have been. I bet he remembers. 2019? I think 2019. Anyway, something like that. Whatever the last convention was before pandemic, before they all got canceled. And Keith and Scott were in the table immediately to my left in Artist Alley. And anyone who's done the Artist Alley convention thing, there's two ways of evaluating whether it was a good show or a bad show. One is whether you sold stuff and made some new fans and got some good contacts. There we go. Let's see here. Yes, you were great. You were great, and I'm glad you came. So yeah, whether it's a good show or a bad show, partly is like how well you did, business and marketing and reach wise. The other is like whatever the situation is, who your neighbors are, what the crowd is like the kind of the environment. And you can have great neighbors and you can have not so great neighbors at a con. And I've had all kinds. So every time I do a convention, it's like you get everything ready. You're already keyed up anyway, because like, how is this going to go? And how much money have I put into this already? And how many books do I want to sell? And, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. But then there's also now this thing of like, who are my neighbors? Because that can make this either a really fun weekend or a real drag. Okay. And so showed up, Keith and Scott over there, and I hit the lottery. They're both great guys, both really fun to talk to. Similar dispositions. We can all talk all day, share our stories. I respect all of their works, like the two of them. It was just a fun, nice vibe, and it's so great when you kind of make a friend. Not just like the basic level of like, can you watch the table while I go to the bathroom and make sure nobody rips me off, but actually like find someone to like chit chat with and pal around with and pass the slow periods of the day, which no matter what's going on is going to happen. There's going to be just these dead areas for a half hour, an hour where nothing's going on. And it's nice to have someone there to chit chat with. And that's what those guys were for me. So we hit it off. And ever since then, it's just been love. I mean, it's been great, whatever it is. So that's how I know those guys. Yeah, yeah. So that's the other thing. The reason we didn't go into this, because kind of like hip hop, I know hardly anything about basketball. But if you listen to the Making Comics podcast, Keith and Scott are basketball guys, and it's fun even for someone who doesn't know anything about basketball. I enjoy hearing people talk about things they like enjoy talking about, or they get excited about, and it's fun to listen to them talk basketball, even though generally speaking I have no idea what they're talking about. Like, I don't know, it's still just sort of entertaining. But your partners are definitely, it's hugely important, hugely. That's why, not only just in case, just as a backup plan, excuse me, I do usually try to recruit someone to come with me, to just sit at the table with me, because God forbid, not only for the basic things like I need to get up, can you watch the cash box, but just in the unfortunate circumstance of maybe your neighbors are terrible and it's a slow stretch of the day where there's like an hour where nothing's happening. If you have no one there and like your choices are either to sit there and like for an hour or just scroll on your phone, like that's a sad scene, man. That sucks. That sucks. So it's nice to have somebody there. You can just, at the very barest minimum, be able to say like, look at this cosplayer, like, or whatever, just something, because it can be a long day sometimes. Anyway. All right, guys, I need to get to work. I need to finish page 32 and do a little housework. I need to take a shower, man. I need this stuff I need to do today, grown-up things. So anyway, thanks for all coming by. Seemed like we had a good chat today. I saw a lot of people watching live. I will see you next Saturday. Talk to you later.